Good afternoon, everyone, once again. Requesting you all to settle down. We are now moving into our next session on designing inclusive livelihoods for particularly vulnerable tribal groups. I warmly welcome Ramesh Velluru, India Program Officer, BRAC International, who will be moderating this session to take his place on the stage. I would now like to invite on stage the panelists for this session. I welcome on stage Dr. Kedar Singh, IAS CEO, Madhya Pradesh State Rural Livelihoods Mission. Dr. Kedar Singh, Dr. Kedar Singh requesting you to please be seated on the stage so that we can start the session. I warmly welcome Amod Khanna, Consultant and Study Lead Access Development Services. Next, I welcome Seema Bhaskaran, Lead Gender and Social Inclusion, Transform Rural India Foundation. I also welcome Manas Satpati, Integrator Pradhan. Thank you, panelists, for being here. I now hand over the session to Ramesh to take it forward.
So, okay, I'm audible now. Take one day. We could go there, visit 5 houses, verify them they have been done or not, and come back. What was surprising to me when I visited that village is that there are 23 habitations. These people on one particular village are spread across 23 habitations. To reach to those 23 habitations, it will take at least 5 to 7 days. With the current mobility, and they don't have any public transportation, either you have to use your own vehicle or some government support to reach to them. Because I'm explaining this situation because we normally, when you develop these kind of development programs, you won't understand the settlement patterns. I think that makes a huge difference when you're working on with PVTGs, especially. That's one particular thing which I've clearly seen. The second, I think we fail to understand their cultural and behavioral traits, like what kind of food they eat, and most of the times we'll try to mainstream development interventions. We think that "Okay, these have been worked in the mainland. Why can't we go and impose this particular scheme on them or this particular policy on them without understanding their current social economic backwardness? What are the cultural and behavioral traits which they have been following? I think we miss this one. I think that's something. For that, we have to understand existing cultural practices within them. So I think that's one. And we also see that the in the recent days, because of the language barriers and the social discrimination, the marginalization and vulnerability of PVTs has been further increased. And I think that's something which we need to keep in mind while working with the PVTs. And adding on to that, I think recently, I think everyone has been seeing climate crisis has been impacting everyone. But the climate crisis, be it heat stress or losing the forest, have been drastically impacting their livelihoods. Because previously, their most majority of their livelihoods have been dependent on the forest produce or NTFP and everything. I think those livelihoods have been coming down these days. In those cases, it makes much more sense for us to redefine the livelihoods that we would be developing for them instead of going back to the traditional NTFP or forest produce kind of livelihoods. Can we think differently? Uh, and most importantly, because there is a continuous displacement, dispossession of tribal people, PVTs happening from forest to the mainland India's. The situations in those villages are not sufficient for them. Or there are poor living conditions over there. Their health conditions have been changed, and in between all this, and they also lost their food habits. I think because of the modernization of food habits over there, there it's not like they're not having access to food. Access to food is still available, be it through PDS or everything, but the nutrition content and the food security which is there in the current food habits is not sufficient to them. I think I don't want to go any further about the reasons or the negativity over there, because it's not all that gloomy or cloudy how I explained. There are a lot of positives are also happening here. I think that's one of the reasons we have been sitting here to discuss this one. So officially on November 15th, the government of India has launched the PM Janman Yojana, particularly for addressing the social economic challenges of PVTGs. This particular scheme will also look into the health, education, problems particularly to the PVTGs. And the cabinet has given approval for about 24,000 crores to be spent on this PVTG communities only. And the interventions where they mentioned spreads across infrastructure, health, education, and skill development and livelihoods as well. And similarly, I think even a development sector organizations also realize that if you want to serve the PVTGs better, there is also need for us to understand them better, understand their livelihoods better, understand their cultures better. So a lot of civil societies have been taken a step forward in that way. Maybe I could also name again Pradhan. Pradhan has recently came up with a status of Adivasi livelihoods report. It covered for the four states till now: Jharkhand, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, where they're able to cover their means incomes, what are the kind of livelihoods they have been doing, and everything. I think this gives a better understanding for us about the status of livelihoods and what kind of livelihoods that we need to promote to them, or is there any migration plays a role, what is the current education levels and everything. Similarly, I think one last before I close this session, moving to the next part, that he BRAC with the support of Access Development Service and MPSRLM has also done a survey to understand the status of poverty and vulnerabilities among the PVTGs in Madhya Pradesh state. So on this note, I think I would now invite Amod Khanna, who led this study in this MP state, to come and share some of the insights and learnings from the PVTG study in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Thank you. Welcome, Amod.
Is this project? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. How much time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. He's expecting me to present a study of 5 months in 5 minutes. Well, I'll try my best. I'll quickly go through the rationale and objectives of the study. You see, the key words for the study are ultra poor and PVTGs. The study is focused on both. The concept of ultra poor is the central theme of the study, and we are trying to look at ultra poor within the context of PVTGs. That's the basic theme of the study. And why we are doing it, because one of the reasons that was the discussion was around, has the government interventions been able to reach out to the poorest of the poor, which is the ultra poor in our case. So that was one reason, and we used the vehicle of NRLM, in our case, we are using the vehicle of MP state SRLM to see whether we are able to reach out to the ultra poor within Madhya Pradesh. So that became the subject area of the study. And this other issues that Ramesh has already pointed out. Can I be comfortable in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. जो बाकी जो मुद्दे थे वो था कि क्या क्लाइमेट चेंज के जो प्रोसेसेस हैं और उनका जो प्रभाव पड़ रहा है, क्या उससे पीवीटीजीज में और उसके बाद क्या जो अल्ट्रा पुअर हैं उन पे किस तरह का असर पड़ रहा है. That was also area that we wanted to explore, and this led us to define the objectives of the study, which are there on the slide. के what are the reasons, what are the structural factors जिसकी वजह से जो अल्ट्रा पुअर के जो फैक्टर्स हैं उनको गरीब रखने के वो और रीइंफोर्स हो रहे हैं, और उनका जो what are the exclusionary areas जो जिसकी वजह से उन सस्टेनेबल लाइवलीहुड्स नहीं अचीव कर पा रहे हैं. दैट वाज वन ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द स्टडी. दूसरा कि एसआरएल में जिस तरह के कार्यक्रम कर रहा है उनका क्या असर पड़ रहा है, क्या एसआरएल उनको उस गरीबी से बाहर निकालने में किस हद तक सफल हो रहा है, किस हद तक उसको सफलताएं मिल रही है. दैट वाज द सेकंड पर्पस ऑफ स्टडी. और दूसरा ये था कि यदि हमें पीवीटीजीज में अल्ट्रा पुअर पहचानने हैं तो उसके इंडिकेटर्स क्या होंगे, हाउ डू वी आइडेंटिफाई दिस. सो बेस्ड ऑन दैट the key research question for this study was how to identify the ultra poor among PVTGs in Madhya Pradesh. अति गरीब को हम कैसे पहचानेंगे. मध्य प्रदेश में 3 PVTG ग्रुप्स हैं. वन इज बैगास, जिनकी जो जनसंख्या है अराउंड 4 lakhs. ये 2011 के फिगर्स हैं. दे वुड नीड टू बी अपडेटेड. सो मान के चलें कि ये ज़्यादा हैं. सहरिया जो उस समय 1.31 lakhs थे, और बहरिया जिनका बहुत छोटा ग्रुप था और बहुत छोटे एरिया में कंसंट्रेटेड थे. जोग्राफिकली अधिकतर बैगास जो मंडला और डिंडोरी डिस्ट्रिक्ट में थे. सो दिस वाज सिलेक्टेड फॉर द स्टडी. जो सहरिया थे वो शिवपुरी और श्योपुर में थे अधिकतर. सो दिस वाज सिलेक्टेड फॉर द स्टडीज. बहरिया को हम लोगों ने स्टडी का हिस्सा नहीं बनाया, बट दैट डजंट मीन कि जो ये ट्राइब्स हैं बाकी जिलों में नहीं है. फॉर द पर्पज ऑफ स्टडी वी वेंट टू द एरियाज जहाँ पे इनकी सबसे अधिक कंसंट्रेशन थी. प्रक्रिया के तौर पे देखें तो रिसर्च प्रक्रिया की ये थी कि हम लोगों ने जो जितने भी स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं डिस्ट्रिक्ट में उनसे कंसल्टेशन करते हुए वी रीच द कम्युनिटी एंड कंसल्टेशन वाज कि आपके हिसाब से आप किसको अति गरीब मानेंगे बैगा में या सहरिया में जिस भी हम काम कर रहे हैं। तो सरकार से पूछना, SRM के लोगों से, SRM की फील्ड टीम से भी बातचीत करना, और ये संकेतों के साथ, इन इंडिकेटर्स के साथ हम कम्युनिटी पहुंचे। वहाँ पर हमने FGDs किए, जहाँ पे FGDs हमने जो महिला ग्रुप से उनके साथ किए, पुरुषों के साथ किए और यूथ ग्रुप के साथ अलग अलग किए। उनके साथ भी हमने यही कहा कि आपके हिसाब से आपके गांव में, आपकी कम्युनिटी में अति गरीब कौन है, उनकी पहचान क्या होगी, हम उनके घर तक कैसे पहुंचे। तो वो इंडिकेटर्स डेवलप करते हुए हम लोगों ने कुछ हाउस होल्ड्स के जो उन्होंने पहचान के दिए थे, जिन गाँव में हम गए थे कि ये हमारे उन गाँव का, हम लोगों ने उन हाउस होल्ड्स का सर्वे किया। सर्वे का उद्देश्य ये था कि जो अति गरीब हैं उनका प्रोफाइल क्या है। वी आर नॉट ट्राइंग टू स्टैब्लिश क्या यही अति गरीब है, कि उसके लिए तो हमें एक गांव का सेंसस करना पड़ता, बट द आइडिया वाज कि यदि अति गरीब है तो इनका प्रोफाइल क्या है। सो बेस्ड ऑन दिस मेथोडोलॉजी आई प्रेजेंट यू द स्टडी। सबसे पहले एक जो हम लोगों को एज अ रिसर्चर बार बार सुनने को मिल रहा था, कुछ जुमले थे, कुछ नोशंस थे जो हमें बार बार सुनने को मिल रहे थे, जो हमें लगा कि जो डेटा आ रहा है वो उनको कॉन्ट्रडिक्ट कर रहा है। तो ये आपके सामने रख रहा हूँ। सबसे पहले सुनने को मिला, चाहे वो बैगा हो चाहे सहारिया हो, साहब ये तो बड़े संतुष्ट हैं, ये बड़े सुखी हैं। तो हमने कहा संतुष्ट है, और हमने ये आप क्यों कह रहे हैं, कि इसलिए कह रहे हैं कि हम कुछ भी करते हैं ये मोटिवेट ही नहीं होते हैं। हमारी सारी कोशिशें इनको मोटिवेट करने के लिए नहीं चलती। बहुत कम लोग हैं जो आते हैं, बट हम जो डेटा देख रहे थे, हम जो सुन रहे थे, वो टोटली अपोजिट। व्हाट वी वर सीइंग वाज इन आवर हाउस होल्ड सर्वेज एवरी हाउस होल्ड वांटेड समथिंग। उनकी एक एस्पिरेशन थी। जब उनसे पूछते थे कि आप आगे क्या करना चाहते हैं, दे वर वेरी क्लियर। चाहे मैं बकरी पालन करना चाहता हूँ, मुर्गी पालन करना चाहता हूँ, दुकान खोलना चाहता हूँ और वेजेस लेना चाहता हूँ, बट दे वर वेरी क्लियर विच साइड के दे आर नॉट, दिस इज नॉट एन इंडिकेटर ऑफ अ कंटेंट कम्युनिटी। फिर हमने देखा कि माइग्रेशन है, जिससे भी बात करें, हाँ हमारे यहाँ गाँव में कुछ लोग हैं जो माइग्रेट करते हैं, कुछ लोग बहुत ज़्यादा माइग्रेट करते हैं। यदि ये कम्युनिटी में माइग्रेशन है तो कंटेंटमेंट कैसे है, फिर ये कम्युनिटी इतनी कॉम्प्लेसेंट कैसे कह रहे हैं लोग के नहीं। तो हमने कहा कि गिवन दीज एंड सम अदर सिमिलर डेटा, हमने कहा वी विल नॉट गो विद दिस नोशन कि ये कम्युनिटी सुखी और कंटेंट है, वी विल नॉट गो विद दिस। और हमें ये भी लगा कि यदि इस नोशन, यदि ये ये नोशन इतना वाइडली प्रेवलेंट है कि जब बातचीत शुरू करें ये तीसरा या चौथा सेंटेंस होता है। तो हमने कहा कि ये नोशन को तोड़ना जरूरी है रिसर्च के माध्यम से, क्योंकि ये आड़े आ रहा है सोचने के लिए, कार्यक्रम बनाने के लिए। तो हमने ये इसको सामने रखा। दूसरा ये भी आया कि पीवीटीज आर नॉट इंटरेस्टेड इन एजुकेशन, वो तो अपने बच्चों को भेजना ही नहीं चाहते हैं, और उसके लिए एविडेंस भी दिया। देखिए ड्रॉप आउट रेट कितना हाई है, आउट ऑफ स्कूल चिल्ड्रन कितना हाई है, नॉन एनरोलमेंट कितना है। बट हम जब डेटा देख रहे हैं और गाँव में खड़े हैं, सब गाँव में स्कूल है, मतलब यदि टोटल डिस्ट्रिक्ट पे भी देखें तो नंबर ऑफ स्कूल्स आर वेरी हाई। फिर क्यों है? जब हमने कम्युनिटी से बात की और उसको और एक्सप्लोर किया, तो वी केम टू दिस कि इट इज़ नॉट दैट दे डोंट वांट टू सेंड देयर चिल्ड्रन टू द स्कूल, देयर इज ऑल्सो एन इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर, द स्कूल्स डोंट रन। देयर इज नो डेटा ऑन टीचर एब्सेंटिज्म, देयर इज नो डेटा ऑन टीचर वैकेंसी। पर जो बात करी तो हमारा तो टीचर है ही नहीं, हमारा तो टीचर आता ही नहीं है। तो हमने कहा ये जिम्मेदारी या ये ब्लेम कम्युनिटी को नहीं पूरा लेना है, इसमें सिस्टम को, व्यवस्था को जिम्मेदारी उठानी पड़ेगी। So in our report, we are very categorically using the word non-schooled. Okay, these are the communities who are non-schooled. So let the schooling system भी take responsibility कि ये हम अपना काम पूरा नहीं कर पाए हैं। थर्ड और important factor था कि they are afraid of strangers. If बेगास को देखें, they go with a full body tattoo, जिसकी वजह से उनको बाहर की कम्युनिटी में, जब वो बाहर की कम्युनिटी से इंटरेक्शन में आते हैं, उनका मजाक बनाया गया, रिडिक्यूल किया गया, they were judged, and similarly Saharias. So as a matter of their interaction, they don't want to listen to you because they know that you are going to be judging them, which the outsiders have taken that they are afraid of strangers. We said no, they are not, because they are migrating, because they are interacting, they cannot be afraid of strangers. So we dropped the notion also, which was also becoming a hindering factor in developing programs for them. Dependent on forest, रमेश ने बोला फॉरेस्ट डिपेंडेंट है, पर जब हम भी बात करते हैं खास तौर से बैगाओं के लिए, जब भी हमने बैगाओं से बात की, उन्होंने जंगल का शब्द का इस्तेमाल नहीं किया। क्योंकि फॉरेस्ट हैज अ सर्टेन मीनिंग एंड कॉनोटेशन इन आवर लैंग्वेज, व्हिच मींस देयर इज अ फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट व्हिच लुक्स आफ्टर फॉरेस्ट एंड अदर थिंग्स। फॉर देम इट इज ऑल प्रकृति। तो उनसे जब भी बात करें वो कहते हैं हम तो प्रकृति से ले आए थे, ये कहाँ से लाए, ये तो हमें प्रकृति देती है. So all these things became very important for us, saying we'll say that they have an ecosystem dependent livelihoods. I'll go quickly. I'll skip the mainstreaming and afraid of since I covered. Let me go to the indicators. There are some indicators which are very habitation specific and they are common to both Begas and Saharias. जो गरीब परिवार हैं वो वहाँ पर रहते हैं जहाँ पे सर्विसेज आर पुअर. वो हो सकता है एक ही गांव का एक दूर का टोला हो या दूर का हिस्सा हो जहाँ पे सर्विसेज कम मिल रही हैं. ये सर्विसेज ये भी हो सकती हैं कि वहाँ से जो ब्लॉक है, वहाँ से जो मार्केट है, वहाँ से जो बैंक है, वहाँ से जो हॉस्पिटल है वो काफ़ी दूर है. और गिवन द फैक्ट कि बस स्टॉप भी दूर है और दिन में एक ही बस आती है, दैट सर्विसिंग बिकम्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट, इट्स वेरी फार ऑफ. दूसरा है इनएक्सेसिबिलिटी टू वाटर. ये सरप्राइजिंगली हमें दोनों जगह सुनने को मिला कि यहाँ पीने के पानी साल भर पूरी तरह उपलब्ध नहीं है और सेफ ड्रिंकिंग वाटर का एक्सेस है, साथ साथ इरिगेशन के वाटर का भी एक्सेस यहाँ पे कम है. ये भी एक मुद्दा था. एंड देयर इज अ इंक्रीजिंग ट्रेंड ऑफ रिसोर्सलेसनेस. और ये रिसोर्सलेसनेस खासतौर से उन कम्युनिटीज थी जो फॉरेस्ट एरिया के पेरिफेरी में थे. वहाँ पर because of declining abundance of species और declining of productivity of forest produce, उनको वो प्रोड्यूस नहीं मिल पा रहा था जिसकी वजह से उनकी आजीविका पे या उनके सेल्फ कंजम्पशन पे उसको आराम से इस्तेमाल कर रहे थे. और ये ट्रेंड इंक्रीज कर रहा था इन परिवारों के लिए. I'll just cover this. Household specific जो डेटा जो indicators थे, I'll just quickly go through it. Disproportionate burden of work is on women is very very high. Non-school that I explained earlier. एकल महिला दोनों तरह की. एकल महिला जो बिल्कुल अकेली रह रही हैं और एकल महिला जो किसी और के साथ रह रही हैं जो अर्निंग मेंबर नहीं है. हो सकता है उनकी बेटी हो सकता है उनका कोई ग्रैंड सन या ग्रैंड डॉटर हो. सिंगल मैन, एकल पुरुष भी हैं, स्पेशली एबल्ड. ये परिवारों को हमने देखा कि इसमें से बहुत कम लोग एसएचजी के मेंबर्स थे और थे भी तो दे वर नॉट रेगुलर कॉन्ट्रीब्यूटर्स. उनकी सेविंग रेगुलर नहीं थी. और जो भी हम मीटिंग कर रहे हैं ये वहाँ पर उपस्थित नहीं है. दे आर नॉट नॉर्मली कॉल्ड फॉर. यदि हम मीटिंग के लिए बुला रहे हैं तो उनको कोई बुलाता नहीं है. तो ये एक उनके दिक्कत थी. बेगाज और इनका स्पेसिफिक देखें तो इसमें मैं दो चीज़ों पे फोकस करना चाहूँगा. वन इज जो लैंडलेसनेस आ गई है बेगाज में. क्या है, एक टुकड़ा था ज़मीन का, बच्चे हो गए हैं, बच्चों में वो बढ़ गया है. तो यदि हम डेटा में देखेंगे तो हमें हो सकता है वो 2 एकड़ 2.5 एकड़ दिखेगा, बट एक्चुअली जो यूज़ हो रहा है वो पर फैमिली बहुत कम हो रहा है. वो दी रिकॉर्ड्स हैव नॉट बीन अपडेटेड बट इट्स एक्चुअली वर्चुअल लैंडलेसनेस. सिर्फ इतना है कि मैं सेल्फ कंजम्पशन के लिए यदि इस्तेमाल कर रहा हूँ तो उसमें कर पा रहा हूँ. दैट वाज ऑल. इनसफिशिएंट फूड बिकॉज अगेन ऑफ योर इकोसिस्टम डिग्रेड हो रहा है. एल्कोहलिज्म आई वुड से इज डिफाइंड एज इतना जो लोगों की भाषा में इसकी परिभाषा थी कि वो दारू पी के जिसपे वो काम पे न जा सके, दैट इज एल्कोहलिज्म एंड दैट इज एन इंडिकेटर ऑफ बीइंग पुअर. आई विल मूव टू सहारिया से डेट इंड्यूस फोर्स लेबर. यहाँ पर जो बाहरी लोग आए और बसे इन दोनों जिलों में, जिसकी वजह से वहाँ पे लोन दिया गया. लोन न चुका पाने की वजह से ज़मीन जो जिसने लोन दिया उसके हाथ में चली गई. वही व्यक्ति अपनी ज़मीन पे आज मजदूर है. ओनर कोई और है, वर्चुअल ओनर है, क्योंकि कई बार जगह ट्राइबल लैंड उसको खरीद नहीं पाते. तो बट वर्चुअल ओनरशिप, रियल ओनरशिप जो है वो किसी और के पास है और ये एज वेज लेबर काम कर रहा है. दोनों जगह माइग्रेशन है. माइग्रेशन का ड्यूरेशन अलग अलग है, बट बोथ दी कम्युनिटीज आर माइग्रेटिंग. एक लास्ट I'll add later. Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Khanna. I think it was very insightful. I think at least for some of us who are first time understanding about the PVTG conditions, I think this is very insightful for us as well. I don't want to waste any further time. We'll directly jump to the panel discussions. Maybe considering the time available, I request all the panel members maybe I would ask to keep 3 minutes for each question. If you have time permits, then I will definitely come back to you. And if you have any questions from the audience, I think then I will also ask you to debrief or explain them further. I think currently for each round of questions, we keep 3 minutes for each question and then we will come back. So first of all, I think I would move to areas. So Dr. Kedar Singh, I think it was very privileged for us, honored to be you are present with us to at this important topic of discussing livelihoods for the PVTGs. I don't feel there is anyone who is very suitable for this particular panel because you have been leading the MPS Salem as well as you are also the director within RD for PM Janman Yojana in Madhya Pradesh. I think my question to you is like I think very simple. Like first of all, I want to understand what are the specific policies or programs MPS Salem or LT state is undertaking specifically for PVTs. I think a kind of a sub follow-up question to that. Based on your experience, do you feel the policies which you will be designing for PVTs should be exclusive from other? What are the policies we are designing for the scheduled tribes or tribals in general? Yes, like feel comfortable to speak.
आपका जो छोटी सी स्टडी है मैं उसको स्वागत करता हूँ और कुछ चीज़ें सरकार के नाते मुझे लग रहा है मुझे काम करने के लिए उसमें मौका देगी रास्ता मिलेगा जो शायद हम लोगों से छूटता होगा लेकिन मैं बहुत सारी चीज़ों से इसमें चेंज संशोधन चाहता हूँ शराब पीना या भूमि के छोटे टुकड़े रखना कानून है सब जगह हो सकते हैं साहूकार उन्मूलन कानून 76 से बना हुआ है शराब अगर उसके पास काम नहीं है या वो जंगल में रहता है या वैसे आया है वो आदमी तो कोई साधन नहीं है तो उससे शराब पी ली होगी ना मैं उसे नहीं मानता कि मैं भी 3.5 साल 4 साल शहरिया के बीच में मैंने सर्विस की शुरुआत की है कि वो हमेशा शराब पीता है पीते हैं सभी लोग पीते हैं वो गांव में पीता तो हम शराबी बोल सकते हैं मोटा में पीता हम शराबी नहीं होते हैं तो जबकि रीजन अच्छा हो सकता है इसमें बंद कमरे में शराबी नहीं होता है और घर में पीना शराबी हो जाता है बेसिकली शहरिया बैगा और भारिया ये सही आप कह रहे हैं कि 2011 की जनगणना है हमारे पास लेटेस्ट सेंसस नहीं है ये सबसे पहले शायद आप सब लोग को पता होगा 1975 में इसको इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया कि पीवीटी से क्या होता है क्योंकि वो आदिवासी हमारे पास हिंदुस्तान के अंतर्गत है विभिन्न राज्यों में तो उसमें तो सबसे कमजोर अति गरीब जनजातीय समुदाय कौन सा है तो सिर्फ 52 जातियाँ तय की गई थी उसके बाद कुछ 93 में 23 और ऐड की गई है आज की स्थिति में 75 में से मोस्टली अगर आप देखेंगे तो ज़्यादा पॉपुलेशन वाली कुछ ही समुदाय हैं 12-14 होंगे ज़्यादातर हमारे पास बहुत छोटे लोग हैं आज इनके लिए समय समय पर लगातार सरकार ने प्रयास किया और उसके फायदे भी हुए हैं चाहे वो एजुकेशन के मामले में शिक्षा गारंटी स्कीम को लेकर प्रवेश किया हो डेल्टा के माध्यम से हेल्थ पर प्रवेश किया गया हो पिछले 2 महीने का एक डेटा आपके साथ शेयर करूंगा बहुत मजेदार डेटा है तो आपने देखा है उस गाँव में जाके और ये चीज़ें अगर हम बात करते हैं कि पीवीटीसी में भूमि का जो साइज है ये सही है छोटा है अगर आप ऑल ओवर स्टेट अगर आप अध्ययन करते हो तो पंजाब अकेला ऐसा स्टेट है जहाँ भूमि का साइज बढ़ा है सारी एमपी का स्टेट गिरा है क्योंकि नेचुरली धीरे धीरे अगर परिवार बढ़ता है तो जमीनें बढ़ने के चांस नहीं होते क्योंकि हमारी हैसियत सारे परिवार की हैसियत नहीं हो जमीन खरीदेगा बड़ा करेगा तो टुकड़े होंगे भाई भाई भी बंटवारे होंगे आगे सजाएगा फिर बेटे में जाए बेटे के बेटे आते हैं होता है तो भूमि के आधार पर हम सारे परिवार को चूंकि सभी को उठा ले ये संभव नहीं होता है आजीविका एक मिशन बहुत अच्छा माध्यम जिसको हो सकता है कि हमें आप लोगों का सहयोग मिलता है उसमें और दूसरा मैं ये भी कहना चाहूँगा कि पीवीटीजी को समझने के लिए आजीविका मिशन का सी होना आवश्यक नहीं है अगर आप उनको जानते हो उनके बीच रहे हो गाँव में जानते हो तो आपको समझ में आता है कि ये आदमी गरीब क्यों है और क्या इसको जरूरत हो सकती है अभी 2 चीज़ें बड़ी अच्छी हुई है एक बड़े जो प्रयास हुआ है जो आपने जिक्र भी किया था पीएम जनमन मिशन उसमें भारत सरकार ने एक बहुत बड़ा मिशन लेके चला है एक प्लेटफॉर्म लिया जिसमें 9 डिपार्टमेंट को शामिल कर दिया आपको सड़क और चूंकि हाउसेस की जिम्मेदारी आरडी डिपार्टमेंट की है वो हमारा कुलिंग वो सड़क देख रहा है हाउसेस मेरे पास है वो भी मैं ही देख रहा हूँ तो जब हम लोग गाँव में पहुंचे तो पता लगा जो पॉपुलेशन हम देख रहे हैं काफ़ी उसमें अंतर मिला है लगभग मध्य प्रदेश में हम देखा है उसमें 2 हमने पैरामीटर हटा दिए हैं जो गवर्नमेंट ने कहा कि जिनके पक्के मकान है उनको आप शामिल नहीं करेंगे और जिनके गवर्नमेंट सर्वेंट है उनको आप नहीं लेंगे तो हो सकता है वो पॉपुलेशन लगभग उतनी होगी सारे पीवीटीजी के पक्के मकान हो सकते हैं सारे घरों में नौकरी होगी संभव नहीं है तो एक कुछ चेंज हो सकता है कि 10 लाख का 5 लाख का अंतर आ सकता है। तो लगभग 1,40,000 फैमिलीज निकली हैं जो ऐसी हैं जिनको मुझे घर और मकान देना है। अब मुद्दा ये इम्पोर्टेंट आता है, क्या हमको मकान, सड़क, बिजली, नल कनेक्शन, ये सब चीज़ें एक छतरे के नीचे चीज़ें मिल रही हैं, और 3 साल के इस अभियान के दौरान वो मिशन में करना चाह रहे हैं गवर्नमेंट, तो लाइवलीहुड पीछे क्यों रहना चाहता है? लाइवलीहुड इस मिशन के साथ जुड़ के उनके खुद के व्यवसाय, छोटे अगर किसान है तो हम छोटे फॉर्म की बात कर सकते हैं, और नॉन फॉर्म पे भी हम जा सकते हैं। नॉन फॉर्म में बहुत सारी एक्टिविटीज हो सकती हैं, और नॉन फॉर्म के परिवार भी फॉर्म वाले काम कर सकते हैं। ऐसा नहीं कि भूमिहीन का काम ही नहीं कर सकता है। तो भूमि रेंट पे लेने के भी नियम बहुत सारे हैं, लोग आपस में लेते हैं। कुछ चीज़ें आपने जो शेयर की है, जरूर मैंने उसको नोट किया है, और इस चीज़ को लेकर मैं अपने स्टेट में भी ढूंढने की कोशिश करूंगा कि साहूकार को चीज़ें कहाँ ये बनती हैं, और आपसे चाहेंगे वो अपना सर्वे अगर मुझे शेयर करेंगे तो बड़ी खुशी होगी, ताकि मैं वहाँ तक जा पाऊँ कि साहूकार अभी भी मौजूद है गाँव में, जो उनकी पैसा लेके ज़मीनें हड़प रहा है। कुछ चीज़ें हो सकती हैं कि कभी आज की तो नहीं हम मान सकते, 30 साल पहले, 40 साल पहले कभी ज़मीन के किराया लिया, ज़मीन का एग्रीमेंट करा के रख लिया, और बाद में पता लगा हमने कुछ लोगों के साथ मिलके उस डॉक्यूमेंट से उसका नाम ही बाहर हो गया, और उसे नहीं पता, या आज उसकी संतान उसके सामने खड़ी है, वो कहती है मेरे पिता ने तो बेचा नहीं, उन्होंने कभी मुझे नहीं बताया कि ज़मीन बेची है, इसकी कैसे हो सकती है? ये हो सकती है। तो उसको देख के उसके हल किए जा सकते हैं। साथ में दूसरा एक्ट भी बना हुआ है, भू राजस्व संहिता, जिसको हम लैंड ट्रीटमेंट कोड बोलते हैं, 165 सेक्शन खा है, उसके अंदर आपको अधिकार दिया हुआ है एसडीएम को कि वो जमीनें वापस लेकर उनको दे देंगे। जो अकेला सेक्शन है जो ताकत देता है उसको एसडीएम को, वो रजिस्ट्री कैंसिल कर सकता है, शून्य घोषित कर सकता है, और जमीन उसको लौटा सकता है। ये मैंने 98 में किया है, ऐसे केस छाटे। दुर्भाग्य कभी कभी ये हो जाता है हमारे साथ कि उसकी जमीन पे कौन काबिज कर रहा है वो मुझे नहीं दिखता है, हमारी आंखें उसको नहीं दिखती, वो कहीं अन्याय करता है हमें दिख जाता है। तो अगर हम लोग देख लेते हैं, तो मैं एक कहता हूँ, तो अभी मेरा जो मुद्दा लाइवलीहुड के माध्यम से तो बड़े जो मिशन के बीच में मैं चाह रहा हूँ कि हमारे जो पार्ट, चाहे वो स्वरोजगार का मुद्दा हो, ट्रेनिंग का उनका हो, उनको बेसिकली फार्म एग्रीकल्चर हम लेके जाना सकते हैं, डेयरी भी हम लेके जा सकते हैं, किराना में लेके जा सकते हैं। और मध्य प्रदेश में एक बहुत बड़ी टीम इस पर ऑलरेडी हमारी CLF और VOs के माध्यम से ऑलरेडी काम कर रही है। तो मुझे जो NGOs या कोई दूसरी जो संस्थाएं हमें काम कर रही हैं, वो तो बहुत अच्छा हमको टेक्निकल सपोर्ट मिल जाता है और बाकी चीज़ें मिल जाती है, कम दबाव से सपोर्ट कर सकते हो। लेकिन अंदर भी हमारे पास ऑलरेडी ट्रेंड टीमें तैयार हो गई हैं। तो हम इस बार हमारा विचार ये है कि हम गवर्नमेंट के साथ तो भी रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहते हैं कि हम 3 साल मिशन बोर्ड पर ले जाकर PVT के साथ काम करें, और PVT को हम थोड़ा मजबूत बना दें। और मुझे लग रहा है ये बहुत मेरे लिए अच्छी अपॉर्चुनिटी है 3 साल में काम करने की।
थैंक यू सो मच सर। आपका जो पॉइंट्स हम लोग मिस बोले थे ना, आप जिस तरह बोले कि PM जनमन के साथ हम लोग उसके ऊपर भी फोकस करना है। अब अभी एग्जिस्टिंग जो कमेटी स्ट्रक्चर है PSLM के साथ बना हुआ है, उसको किस तरह रिप्लेस करना, और जो आपका तीसरा पॉइंट भी बोले थे कि PVT के साथ मिशन मोड में काम करना पड़ेगा नेक्स्ट 3 पॉइंट्स। आई थिंक ऑल 3 पॉइंट्स आर वेल टेकन। अब तो हमको भी लगता है कि वो बहुत एसेंशियल भी है। अभी मुझे पता है सर आपका फ्लाइट का भी टाइम है, थोड़ा रनिंग लेट, हमें सब थोड़ा लेट चल रहा है सेशन से। आपका दूसरा क्वेश्चन भी है, आप कंफर्टेबल होगा तो मैं अभी आपको पूछ लूँगा, इसके बाद मैं पैनल डिस्कशन में कंटिन्यू कर सकता हूँ। सर हम लोग जब फील्ड विजिट में हम गए थे तो उनको एक पॉइंट ऑब्जर्व किया था कि माइग्रेशन। जब नॉर्मली मैंने माइग्रेशन के बारे में जब सोचते हैं हम लोग सोचते हैं कि माइग्रेशन पीपल इसलिए करते हैं कि इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज की वजह से माइग्रेट करते हैं। आई थिंक दिस इज द ट्रेडिशनल पर्सपेक्टिव और बिलीफ अबाउट माइग्रेशन हम लोग नॉर्मली सुनते आते हैं। बट जब हमारा ये वाला स्टडी से हो, जब हम लोग FP में आए, तभी माइग्रेशन के डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव हमको सुनने को। जो PVTs के बारे में बात करते हैं, माइग्रेशन नॉट ओनली हैपेंस फॉर लाइवलीहुड्स, इट आल्सो हैपेंस बिकॉज उन लोगों का कल्चरल या बिहेवियरल ट्रेट है। मे बी कुछ कम्युनिटीज सोचते हैं कि वो हमारे लिए वेकेशन है, एज ए फैमिली हम माइग्रेट करेंगे। जब हम इस तरफ का जो बिहेवियरल ट्रेट है, कल्चरल ट्रेट उनके अंदर है, इफ यू आर डेवलपिंग ए काइंड ऑफ लाइवलीहुड्स फॉर PVTs, उस इस माइग्रेशन को हम किस तरह पोजीशन करना चाहिए?
2-3 चीजें इसमें शामिल करना चाहूँगा। माइग्रेशन दो तीन तरह का आप कह सकते हो। पहली बात तो हम बात करते हैं कि हमारे पास जितना भी पीवीटीजी ग्रुप है वो ज़्यादातर फॉरेस्ट एरिया में, मैदानी एरिया में कम से कम। तो फॉरेस्ट एरिया में हम साल भर कोई भी निर्माण कार्य नहीं खोल सकते, ऐसे जैसे मनरेगा की लिमिटेशन हो सकती हैं। दूसरा क्या होता है, जब उसको काम मिलता है और उसी दौरान अगर कहीं फसल कटाई का काम मिल जाता है या कोई दूसरा कॉन्ट्रैक्टर का कोई बड़ा काम मिलता है जहाँ उसको 2 महीने 1.5 महीना लेबर मिलता है, तो उसे लगता है कि ये टाइम पीरियड का काम है। घर बनाने का मैं कर सकता हूँ, अपने खेत का काम बाद में कर सकता हूँ, जंगल में लकड़ी कटाने का काम बाद में कर सकता हूँ, क्योंकि वो उसके पास रेगुलर वर्क है, वो उससे कहीं नहीं जा रहा है। लेकिन वो अगर काम आज करने नहीं गया तो वो चीज़ उसको अगले 1 साल बाद मौका मिलेगा, तो वो करना चाहता है। तीसरी चीज़ मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, जब मैंने अभी स्टडी की 15 दिसंबर से लेके अभी तक जो हम लोग आवास के लिए सर्वे कर रहे हैं, तो बहुत सारी फैमिलीज जो मोटा के पास ट्राइबल अफेयर डिपार्टमेंट के पास है, करीब 2500 गाँव, मतलब 2300 समथिंग। हमने जब देखा तो वो लोग मुझे 5600 से अधिक गाँव में मिले। तो ये संभव है कि स्टेट के भीतर ही पलायन है, वो पलायन हम नहीं कह सकते। कुछ उनके परिवार के सदस्य जाके काम करने गए, वहाँ बस गए, उन्होंने वहाँ घर बना लिए, अब सीजन पे उनके यहाँ चले जाते हैं। पलायन को बेसिकली वो जो परमानेंटली पलायन है, जो नहीं मिलते, जो आपको जनता पीवीटीजी में नहीं मिलेगा, या आपको झाबुआ में मिलेगा, आपको अलीराजपुर में मिलेगा, वहाँ पीवीटीजी नहीं है, वहाँ व्हील है, वो ज़्यादातर गुजरात में निकलते हैं। यहाँ हमारे पास जो लोग हैं वो जनरली काम के बदले में कहीं जा सकते हैं, और इनका जो फील्ड है वो स्टेट के बाहर बहुत कम है। काम के लिए आप देखते हो कई बार बिहार की लेबर आ जाती है, तो ये लोग भी कई बार टीकमगढ़ छतरपुर साइड से काम करने के लिए बाहर लेके जा सकते हैं। तो स्थायी रूप से अगर आप कहोगे पलायन करते ही हैं तो आधी हैं, तो ठीक नहीं लग रहा मुझे सुनने में कि पलायन करते हैं, काम के लिए जा सकते हैं वो महीने 2 महीने के लिए। अब तो धान सब जगह होने लगा, धान कटाई में जनरली लोग मानते तो उनको ले ली, बुला लिया, कभी कुछ और अब तो चूंकि सब लोग काम करते हैं, पहले सड़क के पीडोडी बनाता था, बड़े बड़े कॉन्ट्रैक्टर लेके आता था, अब नहीं बनता है। आरईएस भी काम कर रहा है, इंजीनियरिंग काम कर रहा है, पंचायतें काम कर रही हैं इसमें, तो अब उनको लोकल गांव में काम है। एक चीज़ें हैं जहाँ जहाँ चूँकि बड़े अजीब सा लगता है, देखो कि अभी भी पलायन है, तो किस टाइप का पलायन है। स्टडी को देख के मैं जरूर उस पर काम करने का मौका मुझे मिलेगा।
Thank you so much, sir. I think maybe moving ahead, I think Seeman, I know, like I still remember like 2 months before when we have a conversation about PVTGs, I've seen a kind of a passion and energy when, especially when we thought about PVTGs, even the word PVTGs. So I think that was very fascinating for me as well. And I do know you have very extensive experience of working with PVTGs in Attapadi, and you have been played a different roles, be it a practitioner, be it the implementation, and also you are also at the government level as well. Given your vast experience, can you explain what kind of institutional support structures need to be in place if you're working or designing your policies for PVTGs and even for the ongoing implementation?
Just before we proceed, केदार जी, I think आपकी flight का time हो रहा है, तो अगर आपको निकलना है तो आप अभी
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this very important panel discussion. So I will be talking about my experience with National Rural Livelihood Mission, and this is a pilot long back. Now I work with TRI, and this was on a pilot project which was implemented in Attapadi, which is Palakkad district of Kerala, which is also a paradoxical condition, because as you know, the human development of indicators of Kerala are much better than any other states. So this itself, that at that point of time in 2013, this block was known for the highest infant mortality rate in the country, which had even gone beyond the rates of Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or all the other most difficult or deprived regions of the country. And that is how we began the work. But then coming directly to the point, so it I felt the most important point was in designing the project. We took some time for designing it, because we realized that most projects collapsed when there was no participation of the community in the design. So we wanted to have a participatory design of the project, and we actually listened to the voices of the community on what they wanted to do, and to understand the socio-economic situation. Now, because this particular community was located in the extreme forests of Silent Valley, which is on the Western Ghats, and extremely forested. So even the remoteness, was a barrier. But then there were various other barriers apart because it was infested with wild animals like elephants, and there was a human animal kind of conflict always. So when it comes to institutional mechanisms, the very initial discussions with the community itself helped in understanding what institutional mechanisms need to come about. So one, we realize that we need to take into account the traditional institutions. So there are already traditional institutions of the community which needs to be taken into account. Second point was that we realized that you cannot, though it was from the NRLM kind of approach, we realized that we cannot have SHG which would be based on microcredit. We realized that we need to have smaller institutions like the SHG, VOCLF, which are homogeneous, which are much smaller in size, and which will be like closer in geographical area. And also cluster level federations, also with a very small population, having a cluster level federation exclusively of the PVTG communities. And we also realized that we need to have a life cycle approach, because we started working also with younger children, and we started working with the youth, and we also started working parallelly with the youth, young men, which NRLM never does, So we started working with the young men because we realized that again, if we don't get the men on board, then the community will not be able to move together. So the institution formation definitely was of the women as office bearers, but we had men as ex officio members in the SHGs, and we had young men group formed, and they would be interested in sports and skill development and livelihoods. So that there were three kinds of work which the young men engaged in. And, because the PVTG community said that we don't understand what you're talking about, savings and lending and internal lending and the Panchasutra, then we realized that, so what is more important to you and what is valuable? They said that seeds are the most, precious kind of possession with us. And we would like to work on seeds and agriculture and cultivation and NTFP. And then we realized that we need to have a seed bank. So I said that, every other community has a investment in the bank. So what do you need what kind of investment would you have? So they said that the most important investment for us is a seed bank. So we actually initiated with a seed bank, and we didn't move on to microcredit. The savings was in the form of seeds. And then slowly it moved on to, at point of time, they did not understand about, the purchase and selling. They actually said that we can do as much of production because it's all FRA, it was common property resources. So they said that we can do as much of production that is possible in various millets, but we would not understand marketing because we want to give all free of cost. We share with our community, we do not sell our produce. So at this point of time, I would like to close, and I feel that we really need exclusive, homogeneous institutions for the communities, which are very important. And I'll come back to the next question in the next round.
Thank you so much, Seema. I think you tried to keep your all insights within 3 minutes, so thank you so much for that. I think we do understand that there is also kind of an expertise in the audience as well. I think let's move to, we also want to hear some of the insights from the audience too. Now I would request the technician to share a Slido question. I think everyone could open their mobiles and scan the QR code, and there will be a kind of a question. I request all of us to answer like with your understanding. Thank you. Maybe for the benefit of all the audience, maybe I could also read out the question for you. Please rank from the highest to lowest in the order of priority the percentage contribution from the following source of income to the total PVTG household incomes in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Okay, in the meantime,
बेसिकली आप देखोगे स्टडी तो हमें खैर मदद कर ही रही है. ट्राइबल जो पीवीटी एक चीज़ और देखोगे, इतना सीधा और ऑनेस्ट आदमी है, आप उससे जो सवाल करोगे जवाब वैसे ही दे देगा. बिल्कुल बनावटी नहीं है. उन्होंने कहा आप काम पे नहीं गए, वो नहीं गए. स्कूल नहीं जाते हो, नहीं जाते, क्यों नहीं जाते हो? खुलता नहीं, वो नहीं खुलता है। बोले खुलता है, बच्चे तो बैठे हैं। हाँ तब खुलता है। तो आप क्या उससे पूछना चाहते हो? बेसिकली उसके साथ समझने की बहुत जरूरत है, उसको वक्त कितना बिता रहे हो आप उसके साथ, ये बहुत जरूरी है। अगर आप पहली बार उसके साथ प्रवेश करेंगे तो आपको देख के तुरंत दौड़ के आपके पास आ जाएगा, और अगर आप देखेंगे गाड़ी खाली है वो भाग जाएगा। फिर आप गांव में बैठ जाएंगे, रुक जाएंगे, देखेंगे ये क्यों रुक गए, फिर एक एक करके वापस आएगा। फिर तब तक आपके साथ रहेगा। आप 4 घंटे गाँव में बैठिए, 4 घंटे आपके साथ बैठा रहेगा। फिर आप जान सकते हो उसको, समझ सकते हो, जो बात कर सकते हो वो उसे समझा सकते हो। और चूंकि ब्रेन खाली है उसका, तो मुझे काम करने के लिए इतना मौका मिलता है कि जो उसके ब्रेन में डालना चाहे वो तुरंत पकड़ लेगा। और मुझे खुशी है कि हमारे 1.5 लाख में से करीब करीब 1,33,000 महिलाएं पीवीटीजी की ग्रुप्स के साथ हैं। तो उनके माध्यम से इसमें जो चीजें इन्होंने हमें गैप बताए हैं उसमें मुझे काम करने का मौका मिलेगा, और ये अच्छा फील्ड है इस समय जनमन के साथ। धन्यवाद। मैं सबसे अनुमति चाहता हूँ, क्षमा के साथ।
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद केदार जी आपकी उपस्थिति के लिए। और एक छोटा सा टोकन है हमारी तरफ से, सो प्लीज एक्सेप्ट करिए। धन्यवाद।
In the meantime, I think we also got some time for also audience to think and answer this question. What was surprising, I think it is the same thing which I was also thinking. Like basically when we think about PVTGs, we normally think that key forest produce would provide the major source of livelihood incomes for them. But what is surprising is the forest produce is the fourth in terms of the source of contribution to their total household incomes. So from the forest produce in Madhya Pradesh, there are only 7% of their total household incomes comes from the forest produce. In Chhattisgarh, it's only 14%. Surprisingly, I think most of people were able to guess farming. I think farmers contribute major chunk of their household income. I think from the farming practices, I think they would be able to earn 33% of their income in Chhattisgarh and 36% in Madhya Pradesh. I think this was when I read this status of Adivasi report from Pradhan, it was at least an eye opener for me. And I was definitely not expecting this. Even Amod during the presentation, he was sharing the notion that when we think about PVTGs, we normally associate with NTFA or forest produce. And so with this understanding, now I want to move on to Manas. Manas, could you explain in this recent trends when we think about the livelihoods for PVTGs? What are the kinds of livelihoods that we need to focus if someone is designing a kind of a livelihoods programs for the PVTGs? And also you could share some of brief insights like how you are able to go ahead with this study and why do you felt there is a need for this study as well?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Ramesh, for involving me in this exercise. Okay, so we are coming up with this status of Adivasi livelihood report since 2021. In the first year, we covered Odisha and Jharkhand. In the second year, we covered Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. And in 2023, we have covered Rajasthan, Gujarat and Maharashtra. That report is yet to come. So you are talking about the MP Chhattisgarh project report. So firstly, I would say that to see any data in isolation will not give you the clear picture. So one thing you are quoting is that percentage of income from forest sources is low. But if you see another data in the same report, dependence on forest is 98%. So it is true that most of them depend on forest. They as Mr. Kedar Singh said, they live in the forest area. So it is obvious they live on it. If you know more about their history, they were mostly into slash and burn kind of cultivation. And if I tell you a little more about the Pahadiyas of Santhal Pargana, they were once when government had tried to settle them in the plains. They left the plains and went to hills. And when they were asked the reason, they said ki in 18th century, the famous famine which was there, plain people had died, they had not died, because they had enough to get from the forest because of which they survived. And they were the first in that region, Santhal Pargana region, to resist Britishers' entry. So such a powerful community which could resist entry of Britishers, which could survive against the famine, now are at the bottom in any developmental parameters. So actually somebody has rightly said that they were the first to die for the freedom and last to benefit from it. So what has happened subsequently, any livelihood patterns which were introduced externally from them, it didn't take into account their situation. First thing, the slash and burn practice could not be, they could not continue with it. Otherwise, even scientists have subsequently said their practice was scientific. They were selecting a patch, cultivating it for 2 years and then allowing it to regenerate. So instead of depending upon any external inputs to cultivate, they were encouraging the natural processes to rejuvenate the soil and do agriculture. So, but then that, because that was not possible afterwards, they cannot rotate and go to any part of the forest and cultivate. When they had to cultivate year after year on the same land, their yields reduced because they were not used to it. And any external intervention didn't actually help them to adapt to the changes. Rather, mostly they have been exploited. Like, to give an example, their lands were used by outsiders for stone quarries, so they gave it on lease, informal lease again, for a very small amount, and they worked in their own lands as laborers in the stone quarries. So such things have happened with them, because of which we see where they are. So now you are saying what is our experience of promoting livelihoods with them. So first thing, seeing the situation today, there are a number of entitlements, but they hardly have access, they are hardly able to access the entitlements because of course all the factors, as the study also says: lack of education, lack of confidence to interact with outsiders, lack of exposure, and it is very difficult to communicate with others also because of language problem. So it is important for external interveners to understand their priorities, understand their aspirations. They also have aspirations. It's not that they don't know anything or they don't have aspirations. Many times things, whatever interventions have not matched their aspirations. Like, to give an example, in Santal Pargana area, TND variety of pigs were introduced. They are supposed to, where stall feeding is practiced, they are appropriate for that. But in their practice, it is not at all appropriate. They are little aggressive. They enter into the houses and they eat their food. They kill the chicks and ducklings. So nobody cared about it, and that was introduced. And when they died, people blamed them for not accepting the livelihood interventions. So that if you analyze any such interventions, it is like that. Like the cow sheds were constructed, goat sheds were constructed, but paravets were not promoted. So they are not able to increase their herd size beyond 2-3 because it is very risky. That is why you will see income from livestock is zero. Mainly it is for buffer income. So what we have experienced, the first thing to do is to help them access their entitlements. A lot of entitlements are there. PBTG pension is there. Widow's pension is there. So we have seen 50% maximum are able to access the entitlement. Under FRA, very few people have accessed lands. Whereas it will do a lot of good to them, because after getting the land rights, MGNREGA investments also can be done. That also they are not able to get because lands are not in their names. So FRA is an important intervention. MGNREGA asset creation will be an important intervention. So first thing, क्योंकि भूखा पेट भजन नहीं होता, जो हिंदी में कहावत है. So first thing is they have to have enough food, and our study also says that food insecurity is very higher in MP, that is around 60%, and it is around 40% in Chhattisgarh. So food insecurity is very high among them. So if they access all these entitlements, mainly the pension, even I think, I don't know, it is there in MP also, I think, government jobs are assured for them. But in the villages that where we are working, around 1% have access to those benefits. So any benefit you talk about, their access to those entitlements are very low. So first, I think, is that. So we have worked on that. And then when they start staying in the village, next thing they will like to access water. Basically natural resource management, sprinkler management, these are very helpful for them to improve their land and water resources, so that whatever they cultivate, they get more returns from that. And with that they can diversify. Livestock will work, but proper paravets have to be promoted, veterinary services have to be ensured, then they can increase the herd size. And because they are in the forest area, they have enough fodder, so livestock is a very potential intervention for them. Then there are, depending upon the.
I would request to conclude your remarks in next 10
so
seconds.
then, so these are the things like livelihoods and infrastructure is one area. I will say government has done very well. Even in our report, you will say 80% of the villages in both MP and Chhattisgarh have all-weather roads. So that is one area where they have benefited. But still, public transport is a concern in Chhattisgarh. In only 9% of villages have public transport, whereas it is very good again in MP. So all these things are there, but mainly they should be helped to access entitlements, natural resources. They still have lands, around 70% of them. Natural resource management is an important intervention. Access to water will be an important intervention. Then varieties of life, that has to be specific. You can't standardize it. Like Tasar sericulture is potential activity in Santal Pargana area. Lakh cultivation is potential activity in Chotnagpur area. Similarly, we need to identify, but instead of introducing activities that have worked in other places, even among tribals, we should not just take it there. There are activities which we can identify there itself that they are doing. Only we have to address the challenges so that they can adopt it. And other infrastructural facilities like electricity, water supply, drinking water, all these have to be worked upon. This is what our experience is in that area.
I think, thank you so much. I think you have given some wonderful insights as well, like how to contextualize the livelihoods. It's not about some livelihoods have been worked in other tribals or PVTGs. Just don't come and impose those livelihoods over there. Contextualize them, think through them to come with that. I think so. Those are very good. Even if those who want to work with PVTGs, I think Pradhan has come up with this wonderful report. At least for the 4 states they have been completed. That has very rich data about their livelihoods, their practices, current, even the food securities. All those details have been very well captured in that one. I think I don't want to waste any further time. I will move on to Amod. I think Amod, during the presentation there was some important point which I mentioned. I think even during the discussion, one perspective that came that PVTs are dependent on forest. I think that's one way of thinking. But in the presentation, you mentioned that you don't want to use that perspective, or rather you thought you want to use PVTs are part of the forest ecosystem. Okay, why do you refine or redefine that kind of a perspective? And if someone is a kind of a developing, designing programs for PVTGs, why do you think people need to think in that perspective?
You see, the reason I say that, because once you use the concept of forest and forest produce, you move to this framework of area which are defined as forest and areas which are defined as non-forest, and areas which are under control of forest department, and there are separate rules, regulations, accessibility issues and management issues are there. But these came much later. The PVTGs have been living in those areas much longer than that, and they have their own systems, they have their own relationships with those. I would rather use the term with the ecosystem, because they don't make a distinction between that my village ends here, this is my village boundary, and that is the beginning of the forest boundary. For them, it's a continuum. And as Maharaj just said, if there is a famine, I'll just go a bit farther and collect more to eat, to get my nutrition. If my crop fails, I'll go to this part of my ecosystem to collect fruits and other roots and then get my nutrition. So that is one reason. If we start looking at that way, then we are talking about regenerating that ecosystem rather than looking at only at a very commercial aspect of looking at forest as a provider of livelihood. So it's not just livelihood, it's life and livelihood for the PVTGs, and we need to take that perspective to be and build policies around that. I'll give you a very simple example. Bagas are the traditional knowledge of Bagas about their flora and fauna is very, very high. Traditional, they know what exists, they know how different uses of each of the not only trees but also grasses, shrubs and everything. They make medicines out of it, they use it for food and the various other purposes. We don't have a documentation of that. Neither has got forest department, despite making working plans which is supposed to document the entire biodiversity. It does not exist, and they are not aware of that. What forest department is aware of it, what NTFP exists in my area which has got a commercial value. They are not aware of it, what exists in my forest area which can help Bagas in improving their livelihood or their well-being. So that is where the reason I say you need to have a perspective of an ecosystem approach rather than a forest-based approach. And once you have having an ecosystem-based approach, you can start developing programs around it. For example, if they have to collect material for their own livelihood, we have in MG and REGA, we have got sub projects where you can make a poultry shed, you can make a cow shed, but there is no program where you can make a shed to store my quote-unquote forest produce. So once you start having that perspective, we start changing the schemes that are meant to be implemented in such areas, and we start, actually what is happening, we are hearing, but we are not listening to what PVTGs are saying. We need to go down and listen more and change our schemes accordingly. It's not that we don't have lack of resources, but we have basically from our side is lack of ideas what people want.
I think that's also a different perspective. I think we should need to relook at when we are working with PVTGs, the forest ecosystem approach rather than the forest dependency approach, which we normally think about. Seema, I think coming back to you, I think I was building on this question, the perspectives, the insights which Manas was sharing. When we think about the livelihoods, I think he clearly said that we need to contextualize the livelihoods for PVTGs. But the question comes, what are the kind of livelihoods that we need to promote? Again, there are two sides which you normally think in the livelihoods. One, the traditional agriculture, the forest-based or agri-allied kind of livelihoods for them. Or shall we think the skill development, unrelated employability kind of livelihoods for them? So with your experience, especially you also worked at NRLM, with your experience, what do you think would be the right approach? Or what are the kind of livelihoods that we need to promote while working with PVTGs?
So I feel that kind of before I come to livelihoods, like a comprehensive approach is very much required when we work with PVTGs. I mean, livelihoods forms a part of all other dimensions of life. So, you know, my experience is that we began working with things like health, you know, the community kitchen for food and nutrition, and also working on complete monitoring of children's health and the pregnant women's health, on to moving towards livelihoods. So within livelihoods, I feel that designing the program in a participatory manner is very important. And this place being extremely rich in natural resources, in NTFP, and also a special form of agriculture which was called Panchakrishi, which is a mix of edible leaves and pulses and tubers and millets. I mean, I think it was an agricultural university to me, because I had not seen this many millets as much I had seen and learned from the communities. So we realized that, you know, you could not set up anything new. And they were cultivating almost in 100 acres of common property resources within the forest. So we realized that we just had to replenish or regenerate that kind of an agricultural system, which was already in practice. Of course, we had to, maybe some change which was made was on the slash and burn cultivation, where, you know, we had to prevent those kind of practices just because of the forest fires. But otherwise, it was like replenishing, where we said that seed bank and purchase of the entire production could be done to be provided to other communities which are malnourished. So this, I think, but apart from that, there were all the aspirations of the community were looked into. So there were demands on, you know, working on NTFP for better price, because there was no, there was no deficit of the kind of NTFP. It was a range of medicinal plants actually mentioned in the Madhav Gadgil report as the richest source of natural resources. So there was huge varieties, and we just wanted to fetch better prices. So the whole focus was on how do you really enable the communities or the cluster level federations to market directly to the pharmaceuticals. That was a very tough process. Of course, we got special orders for that. Even in the Forest Rights Act, it only says that tribal women going on headload. It doesn't say that tribal women can be transporting on their own in the trucks. So that was a major change we tried to bring in through special orders, saying that tribal women, Federation of Tribal Women, can actually transport and market the NTFP. The other demand was on education. There was high aspiration for education. They said that we want to get into formal education institutions. We want to study. We want to be highly educated. So that was really surprising to us. And we had to bring in this bridge schools and bridge courses, where actually we were bridging the educational, levels of the children, So whether they were weak in maths or science or English, and this were really hand holding kind of a support which was provided till they complete 10th standard or some some standards, and then they were mainstreamed into the existing schools. And the biggest achievement was that they said that we want to get into public service commission jobs of the state government. And so we had provided special coaching classes where there was remedial education for this. Today I'm happy that they call me up, the whole batch has got government jobs. And just because of this continuous kind of educational process. Apart from that, some of them said we want to do skill development, which is really good for our communities. We don't want to go and stay in the bigger cities and do work in multinational corporations or do menial jobs there, but we want to engage in plumbing and masonry works which are relevant for our own geographical area. So there were demands coming up that this is the kind of skill development you need to. So we found we found project implementation agencies to do that kind of a skill development which they found relevant in their lives. The other important point was that we got 200 days of Manrega in that area for, just agriculture. Like the Manrega labor days was used for, linking up with agriculture and for development of, all the kind of irrigation and for natural resource management, all kinds of irrigation works which they demanded. So it was a whole host of programs. It was agriculture, which was like traditional agriculture, rejuvenation of the same kind of philosophies which they believed in. It was NTFP and fetching better prices for NTFP and working with a plethora of government departments. It was convergence with several departments like Manrega and agriculture and whole range of departments to be able to implement. So I think, this is a kind of, but designing has to be very, very careful, and it has to be done with the participation of the community. And let's just to share the last experience, that what I learned from that agricultural university is that they had songs, such beautiful songs in their own community, in their own language for every agricultural practice, like whether it was sowing or it was harvesting, and this were all rhythmic. And this is so rich, and the vocabulary is also so rich, but hardly documented.
That was wonderful. I think
and last point is that because of this experience, we could actually upscale this entire project to Jharkhand, where it is still being implemented.
I think that was wonderful. I think on that note, I think we will reach out to the audience again with our second question. I think Seema actually ended with this one about the educations, like when it comes to PVTGs, how to look at the education. Wait for 30 more seconds. I think more or less I will give to audience this time. I think it was less than 5%. So in Madhya Pradesh, it's only 4% of PVTG households are able to complete 10th or above, and in Chhattisgarh it's only 2%. On this note, I think I want to come back to you again, Amod, because even in your presentation you said you use this word non-schooling. I think when we think, even I was there in Madhya Pradesh last week, I think last month, and I was discussing with the communities. There was one interesting perspective that came forward. We said that how many students in your village were able to, at least how many households are able to complete 10th. So they said only 4 students out of 100 households. We asked this question, why? They said that, so even after completing 10th, they are coming and working with us as wage labor. So we are not seeing any incentive for them to go and study. I think, at least for me, this was very interesting perspective. And similarly, it's not about access to schools. Access to schools were there, but maybe the quality of education available in those schools may not be available to them. So here, in a way, whatever it may be, we could think that the conventional education or the conventional schooling has not worked for PVTs. But in those cases, maybe you have shared some very good ideas. Maybe I would also wanted to hear from Amod in those cases. Thinking the livelihoods perspectives in mind, what kind of education systems need to be in place for PVTs?
You see, listening to the community, one gets an impression that education, the formal education, which we mean by school, is their expectation is it will lead them to get a government job. But the struggle of a first generation learner and learning in language which they are not comfortable with, learning by a system which is very rule bound, which does not respect them as a community, which in fact has the perception that these people cannot learn, cannot address, is a heavily demotivating factor. And that is one of the factors which keep them away from continuing education. That's an important factor. But if I look at the data of, there's a lot of scholarship and incentive schemes for PVTGs for continuing education. All these schemes are doing 100%. All money is being utilized every year regularly 100%. Which also means that those who reach the higher levels have a tendency to continue. But the proportion of people reaching those higher levels are very, very less. Those who are not going to the higher levels is a very large number. And that is what raises question on the very design of this system itself. Are we trying to just impart education as we're trying to impart education to the rest of the country? Or do we think of a different way and a different pedagogy and a different language of education here, which could be more rooted into their own context, which could be rooted in their own culture? On the sideline, we also discovered that the young men and women, especially in Begas, want to shed away their own identity. They don't want to be recognized as Begas when they're going out into the market. They don't want people to point out, there goes a Bega. Because tattooing was one of the identity marks. They are not going for tattooing. So if you look at young boys, 9 years, 10 years, 14 years, 15 years, they are not going for tattooing at all. Where the people just before that generation, it's a full body tattoo. So that's the difference it is making, because it's this getting into, which in a way is also they are rejecting their own cultural norms. We may good or bad, we don't know about it. But we need to rediscover and reimagine what education means for PVTGs. Who would be the teacher, what would be the curriculum, and how do we deliver it? We need not go by the set pattern of education system which is meant for the larger thing. But at the same time, I would put a rider to it. There's still an aspiration to get a government job. How do we combine this aspiration with this need for a different kind of education? That is where we need to bring in more thought and more design.
I would just like to share a story.
No, I was actually coming to you on the
you interpreted it as if they said even after education they are doing the same work. It is not the thing. They say even after going to school they are not learning. Because let me share with you what a teacher said posted in the tribal area, in the Santal Pargana area. He was a Brahmin teacher. He says he was blaming government. You see, Brahmins once upon a time were teaching the best minds of the society, and now government is underutilizing us and is placing us in such tribal area where people cannot learn. So if that is the assumption with which a teacher is going to that area, what effort he must be giving to teach the children? So the outcome is obvious that they are not learning. So that is where it is painful for them, that even after sending them, and they are not able to afford to send their children to private schools. People who have got jobs, they are sending their children to private schools. They are not saying that they are not getting employment or anything. The main issue is that even after sending children to the school, they are not learning.
I think my view was completely like I meant to say that for them, like when we think about education, for us we think education for better employment opportunities. I think that prospect was not felt. Maybe as you said, the way we teach education to them is completely different. I think what we think of, because as you said, they are going to school and they are not learning from
Just
there.
assume that they cannot learn.
Exactly. So I think that completely. I think as I said, like I mean, so for the audience, I think we are sorry. I understand we are running little late. I think this would be. Oh, perfect. So I think this would be the last question. I think then I will come back to the audience as well. I think one point again, as I said, like PVTGs is completely new to me. At least when I was speaking to the experts, when I was there in the field visits and engaging with the people, what I understood that you should be a point of entry while engaging with the PVTGs. I think that's the perspective that I learned from that visits or with the expert discussions. So if you want to engage with the youths, because even now within our discussions we came that we have educated youth, we have someone who is less educated youth, or even there are some people who are not went to the schools as well. In those cases, if you want to engage with the youths of PVTGs, how to engage with them? I think that would be my question. I think from there we could conclude the discussions and go back to the audience.
What are the few things we have done? I can share. Like for promotion of any kinds of livelihoods, it requires a variety of services. So these youths have played a significant, including the girls, have played a significant role in providing those missing services. Like if it is livestock, they can be trained as paravets, and they are doing well once trained. Even in tussar sericulture, they are playing a good role in being the grainage entrepreneur, means who provide the disease-free eggs for rearing tussar. So for that means for any livelihood in agriculture, they can do the polyhouse nursery and provide them good saplings. For even plantation, they can do the nurseries and provide them. So varieties of services are required, and it is good if youths from their community are only engaged, as we call them, community resource persons, CRPs. They are trained and they are engaged in providing the required services for the growth of any livelihood activity that we identify for the area. So all these are opportunities. In addition, we can also assess the employment potential in the local. It is many times if they are sent outside, they come back because they don't get much salary outside and they are not able to adjust there. But if for the local employment opportunities, they are trained, like in many government programs also, they are recruiting them, and a lot of these CRPs are also again absorbed by government or many other NGOs in that area once they are trained. So capability building certainly has huge scope, and if they are done for the livelihood activities which have potential in the area, it pays well. Our experiences.
I think that's a wonderful point which I mentioned as well. I think even that's what we understood when we have been engaging with discussions with SRLMs. They were said that if you wanna include local youth, even if you wanna hire some CRPs or community institutions, include the local youth who are from that particular PVTG communities, who understand their cultures better. I think providing employment opportunities for the youth in those PVTG communities is absolutely makes sense. I think that's one of the good learnings we could have from this session. I think I don't want to waste any further time. I think we could move back to the audience. Okay. Okay. Maybe I will give two questions, sir, because audience have been sitting for a long time. I think we could give them options for two questions. Maybe someone could share their views. Or any questions if someone want to have any comments or questions maybe.
I think I won't need a mic. I'm Rashmi Adlekha. I'm representing Harsha Trust. So Harsha Trust works in Orissa in tribal belt for the last more than 20 years. Harsha Trust has been working in those areas. Recently, we have started working with this PVTG community. So there are two PVTG community that we have started working. Tangoria Kont in Raigada and Bonda PVTG in Malkangiri. I would like to just make a point in relation to the livelihood choices for the PVTGs, what Manas was talking about. I think we need to see from a perspective, not just from the income generation perspective, but from a human development perspective, specifically for PVTG. Why I'm saying this, like my experience says that when I've gone to PVTG village, I've seen there are only 10 households, and in 1 month from every household there is one death has occurred. And who has died? The earning member of that particular household has died. and that has a significant impact on the livelihoods of a particular household. There are malnutrition. If you see what Seema was talking about, I think so it's very important that when we work with the PVTG and if we really want to promote livelihoods, we just need to see from the holistic perspective, not just from the perspective of income generation, because if you don't address these multi-dimensional problems, you really won't be able to help the community in addressing the livelihood challenges. This is one, I think, observations that and experience that I have. Another observation, specifically if I talk about the Bonta PVTG in Malkangiri, when I've gone there and we were just discussing about the livelihood profile and all, we learned that they really do not interact with the market. They really do not sell any of their produce to the market. The entire economy is a circular economy. They really, because they reside up the hills, don't get back, don't come down, hardly they come down to the downstairs. So we really need to see and understand this perspective, that how the local economy in that particular area works, and based on that only we need to design any livelihood perspective, any livelihood interventions. For example, in that area, little millet has been grown for many years, and we have seen that a particular household has actually stored all the millet over the past 11, 12 years, and the household is not selling that little millet, because the cultural belief is not to sell the little millet, it's to worship the little millet. So it's very important that from an outsider, it may seem that somebody is actually having holding, say quintals and quintals of millet, but the household is actually not selling. So I think it's very important, specifically when we are working with PVTG. I don't know about MP and Chhattisgarh, but this is my experience working with PVTG in Orissa. And I think these are very valuable perspectives, the cultural beliefs, how they work, the multi-dimensional problem that the PVTGs are facing. It's very important that we target and we address those things. Just don't go with the income generation or just one aspect. That's the only point that I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think you have actually covered some of my summary points as well. Thank you so much. So anyone have any questions, or else I think okay. Okay. I think if anyone have any further questions, I think the panelists would be available even after the sessions. We could meet them as well. Would also request panelists to at least stay for at least 10-15 minutes after this session, because since we are running out of time, I don't think I could extend any further. Maybe you could spend some 5-10 minutes with them after the sessions.
Just one line comment. You see, the whole word itself, PVTG, is a particularly vulnerable tribal group, sets into motion a thought process. We were only trying to find vulnerabilities. Whereas that is not the case. The tribals have a lot of appreciative knowledge also. I would rather use the word particular knowledgeable tribal groups, because each tribal group has got a knowledge of a particular thing. So I think we also need to drop our own frameworks of looking at communities always in a very deficit language and a framework. We need to look at it more appreciatively, so that maybe we've been able to engage with them in even much better than we are doing now. Thanks.
I think it will only take 20 seconds to close the session. I think first of all, I would like to close this session by thanking our panelists. I think this was the first time I'm moderating a session, and I have very much excited, and I think thank you so much for providing that comfort to be in this session. I think and I learned a lot, because as I said like earlier, I was pretty new to the PVTG ecosystem or understanding the PVTG livelihoods. I was able to learn a lot from this session. I think thank you so much for providing that opportunity for me to learn from all of you, and for the audience for patiently listening and engaging. I think most of the times, even in the questions, you are actually engaged in answering those questions, and you ask. I think you also mentioned some relevant comments as well. I think again, it's very difficult for me to summarize the decades of experience in I think 4-5 bullet points kind of a thing. Maybe I will try my best to at least give 1-2 insights, or what is that I was able to learn from this session. First, I think what was interesting, what you were mentioning about approaching a participatory approach, like what they want. I think it's better for us to sit with them and understand what they want, And or the second, when you are thinking about the livelihoods, instead of thinking this is the best livelihood has been worked somewhere else, can we go back to them, contextualize the livelihoods for them? I think those are some of the things that we need to keep in mind. I think third, which is very much interesting, which I also felt in other contexts, is in the urban livelihoods context as well, is that key, when you think about livelihoods, it's not about livelihoods or livelihoods in isolation. It's about livelihoods plus basic services, entitlements, health and education. Means looking in this perspective that you should not think livelihoods in isolation, you should think livelihoods in the multi-dimensional in nature. Think about their education, health and everything. I think these are some of the points to, as a summary points I could say. But I do know that I was not able to do justice to all the experiences that you shared here. Lastly, I would like to conclude. I think this is what I always think about when we think about PVTGs. So here we are all, everyone is discussing. I don't see any PVTGs sitting in between us. I feel when the Access Livelihood Summit is celebrating this 25th years of Livelihood Summit, I think some of the PVTG participants should be coming here, sitting with us and sharing their experiences of how the redefined PVTG livelihoods have transformed their lives and forever. I think that would be my wish. Hopefully that would be filled in next 10 years. Yes, here is the panelist. I hope I will be still the panel moderator. I will still be the moderator, and some PVTG participants would be coming here and sharing their experiences. And I hope they would reach to the stage that they would design their own policies. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
I thank our moderator and panelists for this insightful and engaging discussion. And Ramesh, we've taken a note of your wish and really hope that in the next few summits, or maybe the next one as well, we are able to fulfill this wish. There's a little token of gratitude that we have for everyone present here at the stage. I would also request all the panelists to just gather for a quick photograph. Thank you, everyone. There's tea and coffee which you can grab quickly. The last fireside chat is already in process at the main hall. So you guys can proceed there. Thank you.